little session we have here for this morning is about the Penang government. So,
Nice.
so I have to read out, otherwise I'll completely forget what I'm talking about. So there was a ban to bar, or there was a bar for foreigners for cooking. 13 local items was introduced in 2014 in Penang. So these were imposed by food stores owned by the Penang Island City Council. So the council now plans to enforce the ban on all hawker centres, coffee shops, food courts in the state from early 2025. Now these are Malaysian dishes. I'm going to read out all of the dishes, and a lot of them don't hold their origins in Penang. So this particular panel that we have is really like an overflow from David's talk about what is authentic and who owns cultural appreciation for food. So the dishes are nasi lemak, asam laksa, pasambor, mi sotong, char kway teow soup, Hokkien mee, curry mee, and so they go on. So the move, as you know, would have set the internet on fire, and there was a lot of people for, and there's a lot of people against. So, I mean, it's an interesting. I probably am going to start with you. So, being a Penang boy, Hock, where do you sit?
To be very honest, I think the whole take on this, right? As in, the government's take on this, I think it's noble. To a certain extent, it's to preserve the culture, right? So to say, a lot of the dishes that you mentioned earlier, yes, is available in the whole Malaysia, right? Say nasi lemak, or even Hokkien mee, or even curry mee. But in Penang, it's done in such a specific way, we kind of identify as our own, right? So in Malaysia alone, you have at least 4 or 5 different versions of Hokkien mee, in which, there's only one particular version that we recognize it as our Hokkien mee, right?
Sure.
So I think the whole idea of preserving this is good, but I think there should be more justification done.
Don't you think it... Okay, so one question. One, Hokkien mee, it belongs, or it comes from a part of China where the Hokkien people lived. So then how can it become the ownership of a part of Malaysia?
So it came from a province in China called Xiamen.
Yeah.
So it comes from there. But over the years, you see transformation of that dish. It has a lot to do with the local culture and the local taste buds as well. So, for instance, that particular Hokkien mee went to Taiwan, and it became tan tan mee. That is sweet, that is drier, not much sauce. When it comes to Penang, we adopt a lot more. So you have prawns in there, as compared to the original version that doesn't have that amount of prawns, because of us being an island, and prawns are easily accessible in Penang.
Sure.
So the whole idea is, and also with the chili paste in there, that makes it uniquely ours.
Which is fine, but why
Yes.
should it be restricted to Penang people or Malaysian people cooking it only?
That's my take on this. I think that it shouldn't be restricted to only Penangites or only Malaysians, but I think it should be regulated in some way, right? So, for instance, if you talk about cheddar, right? So everyone can mix cheddar style cheddar, right? And similarly, if you talk about sparkling wines from Champagne, right? I think there should be a body that comes in to kind of regulate all this, as in, this is our tradition. and this is how it has been done. As long as you don't go away from certain parameters, we can still call this Penang Hokkien Mee,
Sure.
and not restricted to who's allowed
Who's
to cook
cooking it?
this.
Who's
or
allowed
not.
to cook
Yes.
it, and who's not
Yes.
allowed to cook it?
Yes, yes.
So there was an interesting in France last year, 2023, the grand prize of the traditional French baguette, which is actually organised by the Paris City Hall, was won by an immigrant from Sri Lanka. Now, what's interesting is it's an anonymous competition. So they had no idea who was behind the cooking of this baguette.
Yes. So that's the reason why I said, look, as long as there is a certain parameter or there's a certain regulation on how a baguette should taste like or should
Sure.
look like,
Then it
or the
shouldn't worry
ingredients
about
that goes in there.
Yes.
Right? Because I'm sure to a certain extent, it's a blind tasting. Like the competition is unknown. So to a certain extent, it's still a baguette, right?
Exactly.
And I'm sure to a certain extent there's a regulation on what can be added into the baguette. So I think that sort of regulation should be in place,
Yes,
rather
but not
than
who.
who's making it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because the thing is, well, as we speak, you like there's a lot more examples of things that's done right in the past, and now because of the exploitation of certain irresponsible parties, the flavor or the character of the dish has swayed quite a bit, and then to a certain extent, is it then detrimental to our so-called local food fare? Yes, it is. I think to a certain extent, if you look at Singapore government, they're kind of encouraging this, and I think at some point of time someone should kind of step in and say, look, this is what we're gonna do, and to a certain extent to preserve the culture or to preserve the unique selling point of Penang being a street food destination.
Yeah. David, there is no such thing as stagnant cuisine, is there?
So I was going to bring up the point that with Peranakan food, it's like, we had chongpos, which were basically your caterers who came in, and they were actually Hainanese sort of like cooks, that actually started cooking in your Peranakan kitchen. And eventually, like in Singapore, a lot of them went into business, cooking Peranakan food, providing Peranakan food. So is that not authentically Peranakan? It's like, just because it's not done by Nonyas.
Exactly.
And they have actually learned and mastered
Yes.
the craft of Peranakan cooking.
Yeah.
So I'm not, I think it doesn't matter who cooks it. Yeah, it's like, of course, my question to this is that what's the end game, right? It's like, what are we trying to do here? Are we trying to preserve, a certain dish? It's like, and again, it's like, I think adaptation is really just part of life, right? It's like no two hands are going to cook the same thing. So it's a matter of, how different is it? And it's like, and even with time, 50 years, whatever, you're going to find that things are going to change.
Of course.
We just don't realize it, and we probably don't realize how much adaptation goes on and takes place.
Yeah,
it's like,
I think the other problem that may be faced in Penang is that obviously a lot of foreign workers are the ones who are working in the hawker centres. If they have to be Malaysians, then salaries are going to double, treble.
Well, this is the thing I was thinking too, is that I'm not so sure what's happening in Penang, but in Singapore, right? It's like, well, the young generation don't want to go into, hawker businesses and whatnot.
Because it's hot.
Exactly. So I don't think the Singapore government is actually placing sort of like restrictions as to non-Singaporeans not, being able to cook or provide this sort of hawker food. So I'm just wondering, like, what's kind of the thinking behind this restriction?
Yeah, I think that's the reason why I said there are more justification needed from the government side, because the thing is, to a certain extent, from my understanding, I spoke to a couple of people with regards of this, and a lot of them are actually from the state government. It's part of the blueprint to actually protect the benefits of the local people eventually. Hello, hello.
Hello, hello.
Right. So one of the reason being, as in the younger generations are not taking over because obviously, cost of living are going up. It's not a lucrative business, and you're constantly challenged by the fact that the main consideration is always the cost of the product, right? If we would have hired a foreign worker, we could have duplicate this and then sell it over, different hawker stalls. And you're actually seeing a starting of that in Penang now, right? Which is eventually it's going to be detrimental, and that's the reason why these measures are kind of put in place where they want all these to be like uniquely Penang, and that's only specific people that can do this. That's the reason why I said yes and no. No, because anyone can cook. If they get this right, everyone can cook. There should be a governing body, but no, because I think to a certain extent, it now the whole idea is the younger generations can't take this up, right? It's just not lucrative enough, and everyone's doing it. If I were to exploit this as a business owner and I hire 10 foreign workers to do this, definitely my cost is at its lowest as compared to you doing it yourself.
Sure,
and
of course.
how scalable is this business?
Yeah.
So that's the whole idea behind it. As in, eventually, if no one's taking up, and then this is a part of history, and this is part of the unique selling product of Penang, someone would eventually kind of take up the task and do this.
That's kind of just life, isn't it? That things evolve and they move, and there's no, like, culture doesn't exist in a vacuum. So
Yes.
do you think the Penang City Council is trying to hang on to something that...
Yeah, I think there's no dispute in that. Definitely things are changing, but at least what they're trying to do now is to at least slow down the process, if not preserving it.
Right.
Right. So I think the measure's noble, but it's just not done right.
I just wanted to say, it's like, how are you preserving? I guess it's like, because is it counterproductive by doing something like that? It's like, because is it gonna just mean that there'll be less people doing it, and therefore it's like it's
And it becomes a lot more expensive.
Exactly. It's like
Yeah.
and then it will sort of like bring on the death of of the dish or the culture.
It becomes more, like fancy cuisine because it can only exist inside a nice restaurant. Yeah, it's a very, very interesting point. Yeah. Louis, you're, you're half Chinese, half Fijian.
I'm
Grew
kind
up.
of, I guess I'm the epicenter of this whole conversation.
Yeah, well,
now,
yeah,
so,
yeah. I find it fascinating.
um,
Sorry to drag you into Malaysian politics, but how do you feel as like obviously like a mixed race person? You're cooking Chinese food.
Yeah, so my nickname was fruit salad growing up in Fiji because my father's
Oh my God.
Fijian, his mother's Fijian Chinese, but his father's Fijian Indian, and my mum's half Irish, half Scottish. So, and that was food for me. Food was everything, for us. And, basically my grandparents were pretty much banished from both sides. because a Fijian would be with an Indian and a Fijian would be with a Chinese, but a
Yeah.
Chinese wouldn't be with an Indian. So, and it was kind of, so my grandmother was an amazing Chinese chef. Her father had the first Cantonese restaurant in Suva in Fiji.
Wow.
But then my grandmother had to learn to be a great Indian wife and learn amazing Indian food and roti and dal and prepare her own dal that she would pick from the tree and dry out and split. And, so my grandmother's Indian food was unbelievable.
Amazing. Delicious.
Unbelievable. And
Yeah.
I'd wake up to fresh roti being made in the morning, and I'd go and sit on the plastic stool and eat with her. And that was just the dinner table every night. We didn't know if it was going to be Indian, Fijian, Chinese, mix of Western food. So it was and then through that kind of, adventurous, exciting cuisine, I fell in love with Southeast Asian.
Yeah.
Because I thought the levels of complexity and the layers of Thai food reminded me of my childhood, from eating everything from crab curry to steamed fish with ginger and shallot to panipuri, so it was in fresh roti. So I think that's what drew me towards Southeast Asian, and then that put me then in that situation of who's this guy cooking Southeast Asian. And I can definitely understand this topic, and I feel like I've lived through a lot of it. Like moving to Los Angeles, opening a Southeast Asian restaurant with a lot of Thai chefs there, just wondering, how did this come about and who was I and why was I cooking?
Had you ever lived in Southeast Asia before you opened a Southeast Asian restaurant?
No, just traveling and learning and falling in love with the cuisine. Like I've known Prin for 15 years because him and I both. I was working an event with David Thompson, and he was helping David, so I guess just that love of the cuisine forced me to just become obsessed with it and research it and cook it and pick David's brain 24/7, and learning about the cuisine as well, which I think makes it really, really interesting and passionate.
Yeah. So should we have competitions like what did the Paris City Hall do? And have competitions on cooking Hokkien mee, but anonymously?
Yes. I think to a certain extent, that's a certain framework that, they should encourage, where, like what I've mentioned just now. Similarly, if you were to look at, these things are not new, right? If you were to look at, how the French government put AOC and AOP in place, the whole idea is because this is a very, very long heritage, and there's a specific way that they have recognized how things are done. And even our forefathers, right, when they first came, I think we have changed over the time, definitely, and we have seen a lot of these over the past few years. The depleting of these heritage dishes. We have lost some, actually.
Yeah.
In which now the government is actually putting in place, a regulatory body to kind of research on all these dishes, and they want eventually to kind of streamline all this, right? Just to make sure that all these dishes still remains at least in a certain framework for the next 50 years. So that is very much them and what they are trying to do, because it's our culture, right? So it's something that they really want to preserve. And yes.
Okay, so we'll ask we'll open to the floor. Where's Aaron Core? I know you're vocal. Why don't you share your thoughts? Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Chinese guy didn't drop into Egypt because I have. And I think that the question about what's authentic, what's traditional, I mean, I also like to about the chef there. He's always told me that culinary is a weapon for us to feel that cultural cuisine is always fluid. And I think that the government should understand that, but it's not necessarily communicated very well. And that the ban is sort of to impose a greater cost, but it is using a wrong weapon. And what you said, they know the answer to it, but they're necessarily, I think personally, they're using the wrong weapon. That's why.
Yes.
That's interesting. Go.
I'm just wondering if, rather than making these sorts of regulations, if the government is actually better off just documenting, the recipes.
Yeah, which is a bit like what champagne does. What is it? Designated product of origin, the DPO. So the
Yes,
same
they
as
are.
Parmesan cheese, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And then, you don't need to only restrict it to the people from that.
Yeah, I think they are. They are definitely documenting that now. Especially, with some local chefs. I know they are working with local chefs now to kind of document all these dishes. But like I said, the whole intention or the whole measure. I don't speak on behalf of the government, but the thing is, I think the whole intention is to stop business owners, because the thing is, to start business in Penang is relatively accessible, right? You can start a food stall cheap. You can start, and then we see a lot of people kind of doing that. But the thing is, I think also the whole idea is to stop people from exploiting foreign workers, because they are so accessible now,
Right.
and to use them as a tool, because it's a tourist destination, and to make them as one of the food traps,
Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
for tourists.
Yeah.
I think that's the whole intention. But again, like I said, it's just not communicated well.
Yeah. Okay. Might take a couple of questions from the board. So, I like. So, when does the evolution of a recipe stop and get documented? Because if cuisine cannot exist in a vacuum, then when does it stop and get documented? Because it's constantly evolving, right?
Yes.
And are there any NGOs? And are there any NGOs which are documenting? Do you know of any?
I know they are
Yeah.
working with Peter Yeo at the current moment,
Okay.
and a couple more like chefs that does Peranakan cooking. So it's just different sect, to be very honest. Because if you look at Penang cuisine is a melting pot, right? You get the Malays, you get the Indians, you get the Chinese, but also they are talking to very very specific people with regards of this, like not us, because when they are still around. Because the thing is, if there's anything, one example that I can give is there's this famous old couple, like auntie in Aitam, that sells karimi,
Okay.
right? They are in their retirement age. They are in their 70s now, right? And past 5 years, a local MP kind of approached them and say, look, we will assist you by
Yeah.
giving you these new cooks or these younger cooks. You teach them how to cook. We pay them on behalf. You keep the earnings, but we keep the recipes, right? Those are the measures that is slowly put in place. Because the thing is,
Okay.
like,
But
one
then it
common...
becomes a commodity.
Pardon?
It becomes a commodity, the
Yes,
recipe.
Yes. And it is part of documentation as well.
Right.
Look, we are talking about evolutions, right? It will not stop. Not stop. The evolution process, because the thing is, the cuisine itself is constantly evolving, right? But I think that's the reason why you should have regulatory body to kind of then decide on things like that, where, like, even if you were to look at AOP is not decided by one person, it's decided by one regulatory body. I'm
Sure.
like, that's nothing perfect,
Sure.
right? But that's the closest that they can do to at least preserve the culture and get things done right. Because we don't want, like, over the past 10 years, we have seen, like, Penang was once famous for its asam laksa,
Yeah.
right? Now, it is very, very hard to even get an asam laksa close to what we had when we were kids.
Yeah.
Because of the changing of diets, the preference of flavors. Another example that I can give was that asam laksa dish, right? Where I remember, like, one of the condiments in Penang asam laksa is pineapples.
Okay.
And the reason why the recipe asked for pineapples is, asam laksa was somewhat a dish that, fishermen does on the boat as they catches the fish, and they don't even have time to gut it down, right? They'll just throw in a pot, but time they reaches the shore, the soup is ready, right? But the thing is, when you don't gut the fish, it's bitter.
Yeah.
And the whole idea of the pineapple is to kind of counter the bitterness, right? But if you were to look at the asam laksa that you have in the market now, unfortunately, a lot of recipes ask for pineapple as a base stock of the soup,
Yeah.
right? And I think all in all, it loses its authenticity and stuff like that. Also because now the quality of life and things like that, people don't necessarily want gut to be in their soup, but that's part of the history, right? And the reason why they also have prawn paste is to also for the same particular reason.
Mask it.
But look, if you were to look at the dish itself today, if you think that pineapple is not sweet enough, recipe asks for prawn paste to be added in the soup or added in the stock base. So, which is rather unfortunate. And people are actually slowly realizing how important it is for us to document this down and to do this right. And that's just a matter of 10 years. Yes.
I was just gonna say, 30 years ago, the Nyonya Kuehs was so much tastier than what we get today.
Exactly.
It's like, and the thing that I'm also thinking of is that ingredients may not be available anymore in comparison to
Yeah.
like 30 years. I mean, like your blancas or your horseshoe crab. Yeah, used to be in abundance on your beaches in Malaysia, which we don't see anymore. Yeah, and I think they're even an endangered species. So, so we have realities of ingredients just not being available.
Just to correct you there, I think horseshoe crab is now farmed widely in Penang. Like we have it on the menu, right? So yes, at one point, so everyone can kind of like you can get it from the shore easily, right? But now you can't because of overfishing and all those things. But you see those coming back because people are at least putting an effort to make sure that things are done in that specific way. And go back to the question on the kueh, it tasted a lot more better like 15 years ago. That's the reason why evolution is so important because not just the recipe only evolves, the ingredient changes too, right? If you were to look at milk rice 10 years ago versus the milk rice that you have today, is so different. So to a certain extent, I think you kind of have to improvise the recipe, but as long as you kind of work within that framework or the flavor profile, then it's right. But also, I think, unfortunately, I think politicians versus food, is that actually the priority? Unfortunately, most of the time, no.
Yeah.
But they are actually looking at this in a bigger picture, but they are not getting the right person to kind of get this done right. So that's the reason why I think, to a certain extent, a lot of Penangites, they welcome this measure, but we all just have to agree that it's not justified enough.
Cool. Okay. We've gone overtime, as we normally do. So I think we'll break for lunch. Yo. Oh, sure. Go.
Well, I guess. Am I still? Well, I guess it's where we face the same challenges, especially probably more so coming from a cost of goods aspect, where things are being left out and things are being replaced or shortcuts are being taken because the cost of goods are just monumental, and you can hear it from fast food to fine dining. I know the McDonald's apple pie is choco with apple flavoring, and that's kind of, I think, just directly relates back to this topic. And sriracha is meant to have ginger in it, but there's, you look at every bottle of sriracha, there's no ginger, And so I feel, but then, you come to this modern day kind of, I guess, the intellectual property with, should we regulate different restaurants stealing different ideas from, Instagram and things like that, So I guess we're faced with the same challenges, but, listening this conversation, I feel the government is on the right journey, but just saying it in the wrong way. I think the ingredients list is actually where the problem is lying. But no, Australia is very...
But what is Australian food?
Aussie food, we is Thai. That's what we like.
It's Thai.
Joking. And that, I was talking with Aaron about that, what is Australian food?
I have no idea.
I think Australian food is Southeast Asian. That's the, I think
Okay.
that is Australian food. That is the food that Australians cook the best and Australians like to eat the most. But Aussie food, I guess, I think there's two sides to it. There's I think Asian is such a stronghold
And then
in the
fish and
cuisine.
chips.
And then I think European, which is crazy, or what we do, so well is adapt these European dishes, but put a very zingy, zesty, light, healthy spin on them, which, I was a private chef in the Hamptons in the US, and he approached me because, he came to Australia in the 80s and 90s, and that's the cuisine he fell in love with, and
Right.
he thinks, he goes through, this guy, he was the managing director of Morgan Stanley, and so he could have any chef he wanted, but he always kept coming back to Australia because he just said, what you do with the seafood and the veggies, and you keep it so light and so healthy, that's what I want to eat. But even when he explains it to different chefs, they couldn't really pull it off.
Yeah.
And even when I cook Cantonese food or Chinese food, that's something I think that's inbuilt, and I love it. So very light and not so heavy.
Yeah. And
that's-
here's a question. How do Cantonese, diehard Cantonese people feel about your food?
Well, I guess this is kind of where this topic, circles back to as well. Well, I've always just been such a huge believer in, I just let my food do the talking.
Right.
And, I think that would be another aspect of regulating these recipes is, over time, a good restaurant that serves quality, passionate food will always be successful.
Yeah.
And the ones that are cutting corners and not staying true to the heritage or the recipe won't. So I've always just let my food do the talking. Any type of food that I cook or any ingredients or cuisine, I would always just let my food do the talking, and
Yeah.
they can argue with that.
Yeah.
So,
I mean-
have you ever had anyone question the authenticity of your food then?
Oh, I have people come to the past screaming at my face. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
What? Angry because they didn't think that it was in line with...
Yeah,
with
this is not how we do it. This is a
In Hong
different-
Kong
and-
or in Guangzhou.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And yeah,
You're
but
not
I say,
Chinese
but
enough.
like on last weekend we served 550 people, and I say, oh well, if 449 people loved it and you didn't, then I'll roll with that gamble and I'll roll the dice. That's pretty good odds to me. So yeah, no, I never let it really get to me. I guess it's, me and Ben grew up in the same small country town of Mullumbimby, where my family was the only
Land.
different family. So I guess I've had it my whole life of not being like everyone else. Or
Yeah.
so I guess I've developed quite thick skin and only ever just stayed true to what I believe in and
Which is
to how
good.
I was raised.
Yeah. I mean, Hock, you cook kind of, I mean, you have a Spanish tapas bar.
Yes,
You have a Japanese
Yes.
place.
I do.
Legend.
And you have a restaurant which cooks local, well, no,
Yeah,
uses local
we are
produce.
starting one.
But
We are starting one. Yes.
You're Frenchy cooking,
yes.
French name. Has anybody told you that
No,
you're not?
actually, look, we have French walking through our doors, right? And a lot of them were actually quite impressed with what we did in our restaurant. For a simple reason, I think the fundamental of cooking is still very, very Frenchy. But over the years, we have chosen to take the path where we adopt a lot more local ingredients and also local culture.
So it doesn't identify itself as being French anymore.
Does it not? Because if you were to look at the spirit of French cooking, it's very much getting what you get from your local terroir.
Yeah,
And why is Northern French and Southern French so different?
yeah.
Because obviously culture plays an important role in dictating the flavor profile or the character of the dishes. So the whole idea is, as long as if we want to call something, very, very specific, we might as well just do it really correct, right? But otherwise, just don't call it
Okay,
that way.
yeah.
Like, you cannot be serving a tiramisu. Like, not cannot, right? There's a lot of people doing it, but I to a certain extent, I think my take on this is you cannot be using the term tiramisu and at the same time you're doing a kueh out of coffee and you just call it tiramisu. I think to a certain extent there should be it's
Guidelines.
a guideline on how things should be, because
Yeah.
the thing is then you're confusing your
Your
whoever's
patrons,
buying
your
it,
customers,
right?
yeah.
Yes.
Sure.
Yes.
Cool. All right. Okay, guys. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.